Welcome to another episode of Meal Prep Monday. I'm your host, Allison Schaaf, and today I'm talking about food storage containers. But before we dive in, a quick reminder that if you have never tried our time-saving meal prep meal plans, you can go to prepdish.com/MPM, that's short for Meal Prep Monday, and get a 2-week free trial. This will also be linked in the show notes. These meal plans provide an organized grocery list and specific instructions on how to prep your meals for the week. I suggest starting with our super fast meal plans. These plans require an hour or less of prep time, and you will have 5 dinners ready to go for the week. So this is really where I recommend starting. They're really quick, easy, and healthy, tasty meals. Okay. Today's topic, containers. I was looking back to see if we had touched on this. I know we've touched on it a little bit in past episodes, but I don't think I've done a full episode on storage containers. And this is really probably one of the most common questions I get at Prep Dish because we are so focused on meal prep. You know, when you're prepping your meals ahead of time, you need to have them stored somehow, right? And the more meals you do, the more storage containers you need. So that's kind of one of the key, I guess you could call it, tools that you need if you're going to be doing some meal prep, is how are you going to store all of this food? And kind of the easiest go-to would be, some large Ziploc baggies, or, they also sell kind of those plastic containers. And before I jump into I think I have 3 recommendations written down of my go-to storage containers. I want to talk a little bit about this and why I avoid going to plastic. So first of all, and this is kind of similar to our meal plans, with our meal plans and our recipes, I have a background as a chef and dietitian, and I always say, well, the chef piece is first, right? Like the food has to taste good. So with storage containers, that would be my first thing with plastic. I don't feel like food tastes as good if it's been sitting in plastic for a while. I feel like it kind of impacts the flavor. So that would be my first thing. And then again, with the recipes, okay, they have to taste good. And then of course, I want them to also be healthy. That's where my dietitian piece jumps in. And okay, with the plastics, if you put your food in plastic, there are chemicals that can be leached into your food that can really, the biggest concern is that it will impact your hormones. And I know BPA has gotten a really bad rap, and so it's been removed from a lot of plastic, but there are studies that show that yes, okay, BPA, good to get that out, but there are still other chemicals in plastics that can impact hormone levels. And I'm kind of in the world of fertility. I also have a fertility-based business, and so definitely for fertility, you don't want to be impacting your hormones, but there's a lot of reasons for overall health for both you, especially for your kids as they're growing and developing, that you don't want these hormone disruptors being leached into their food. So, and I have one study that I might link that's kind of explains that the best. So I'll put that in the show notes. Just with that research of look, plastics, even when they have the BPA removed, are not great to be using to store food. So let's get past that part and on to what the solutions are. So my number one go-to storage container is a glass storage container with a BPA-free lid. So yes, it's still a plastic lid. Honestly, the food, I actually make sure that the food isn't touching the lid. Partly for, I don't want it touching the plastic, but also if you're sticking something in the freezer, you don't want it filled all the way to the top, because as it freezes, it'll expand and it'll the little, it'll kind of come off anyway. So, I'm usually not filling these to the brim anyway. And I do have 1 or 2 containers with glass lids. It just practically doesn't work as well. So my brand that I like to use is Glasslock. So I used to always order from Container Store. Lately, I've found it's easiest to just order directly from Glasslock USA. And I am not a, sponsor. This isn't an ad or anything like that. These are just the containers I've used really from back when I was a personal chef. I actually had all of my clients, I would purchase these containers for them. So that's when I was cooking food for clients, I would make sure they were stored in these containers because they did keep food kind of fresher longer. And it's also better because there's not really the plastic concern. So a few things, there's might be other brands out there. So the things that you want to look for. Oh, sorry. I actually want to backtrack and say, so Container Store, Glasslock USA, which I'll link that. I'll link these in the show notes. And then I've heard people say that they've found these at Costco. If you've listened to my Costco episode, I've been to Costco a handful of times, but I actually don't know if they're there, but I've heard multiple people say that. So you might, if you're a Costco shopper, you might be able to find them there as well. Although sometimes they're kind of like a mixture of sizes. I prefer to have like one or two sizes because I feel like that when I store them, and especially when I have a lot of these. So when I store them, I like to I have 3 different sizes. And so that's when I store them, it's kind of like I have 3 different sections and it's not like 8 different sizes and storage is a nightmare. So that's been my method is like I should do a count for you, but I would guess like I have over a dozen of each size probably. And a lot of them are like, in the freezer or fridge any given time. So things that you want to look for on these glass containers, you want to make sure it's tempered glass. So what that means is that it'll withstand a temperature change. So, if you put food in there and put it in the freezer, it can withstand that a little bit better. I will say there was one time where I took it from, I can't remember. I actually think I took it from really hot, like out of the oven and then put water in it and it burst. So, these things still can burst even if they're tempered. So I would try to avoid like really extreme temperature changes. Like if it's coming straight out of the oven, give it a little bit before putting water on it. I learned that the hard way. But for the most part, these tempered ones can go. So I do take them from freezer to oven. I take them from freezer, defrosting in the fridge and then, eventually into the oven and they do fine. And that is because they've been tempered so that they can withstand those temperature changes. And then looking, of course, with the lids, trying to get BPA-free. And then also just like the durability of the lids. So, I'm trying to think of the other brand. There's another brand of glass containers with lids that I have used from time to time, but the lids I found really don't last that long. Like they, within a few months, are kind of like already busted. And even with the Glasslock, I will have a few of the lids that over time, that's what happens is I find the glass really it never breaks, but sometimes over time the lids will kind of get to where you need to replace them, but it takes years because I've had many of my same containers for like several years. So that's really my go-to. I have a lot of these just so that if I am filling up my freezer, I always have plenty. But of course, when I'm doing a prep dish prep day, if it's a really big week or I'm doubling all my recipes, there's always times where I do run out of containers. So what I do in that situation when I run out of containers is my next step is I have a bunch of stainless steel bowls. So this is something in my household, my husband is more the one that likes to have backup of everything. And I kind of resist. I'm very much like, I prefer to be a minimalist where I can be. But he went and got us a bunch of the same size stainless steel, large like mixing bowls. And these have come in so handy. So we have not tons. We probably have, 6 to 8 of them. And when we do need some backup food storage, and this is for the fridge, not the freezer, we will just take a stainless steel bowl. And then we have silicone lids. You could also we have some of those beeswax papers and we'll use those to top it as well. I mean, of course, you could do something like foil or plastic, but again, you've kind of got that situation where the foil has aluminum, the plastic has other chemicals that can leach into the food. So I would prefer a silicone lid or like a beeswax paper to put over the bowls. But when I have excess, I use that as my backup container, a large bowl with a lid on top. And that works well. It doesn't seal quite. It does, like if there's liquid in there, you can get those silicone lids to seal, but it's not the same as a container. You have to be careful when you're like removing it from the fridge so like nothing spills out. But if you just have like some chopped sweet potatoes, put it in a stainless steel bowl with the lid on top, that's going to do pretty well. So that's my like step number 2. And then the third thing that I use for backup is silicone baggies. So the brand that I know of, but I do think there's a few brands out there, but there's one called Stasher. And so that's one that I will use as well. I find I like my Stasher bags more for like, using it as a replacement for baggies for like a trail mix, or, when I'm traveling, like as a large bag to put food in, that sort of thing. But I use it as kind of an alternative to a Ziploc bag, because I know a Ziploc bag is what a lot of people use for food storage. And I do try and stay away from that. I will say I have been known, especially if I do a big, fill my freezer with a bunch of meals. Like I think, when I did that before baby, like, okay, yes, I went through all my Glasslock containers, but I did get to a point where there is something where the Ziploc baggie is easy and convenient to use. And so that's where having some extra stasher baggies is, I don't know if they're called stasher baggies. I think they're just called stasher bags, but having some of those is a nice alternative. So those are kind of the three things that I would use as my go-to for food storage. Definitely like the glass containers with like a really nice sealing snapping lid. So I guess that's maybe the difference between the one that breaks and the one that doesn't, is that Glasslock has like these like lids that snap on really well. Then the next one would be a large bowl with a silicone lid. You could use a glass bowl as well. I just think the stainless steel is nice because if you drop it, it doesn't break. And I know my kids love to play with them. So that's a nice one that like I can give them to play with because it's not glass. And then the third one would be a silicone bag. So those are my 3 container ideas. And again, if you haven't tried the Prep Dish meal plans, if you're looking for some food to fill in all of these, fill up your containers with, you can just head to prepdish.com/MPM and you can try them out for 2 weeks. Or if you want to text us, it's still set up where you can text the number 33777 and you're going to put in the word meal prep, all one word. And then I'll just send you 1 week to try for free. So I think it's our beginner meal plan and you can just try that out and see how that goes. And then one more reminder, if you have been listening to this podcast for a while and are enjoying the episodes, if you could just go and leave us a rating, a review, it helps other people to find the podcast and just really helps me out. So I would appreciate that as well. That's all I have for this week. I will be back again next Monday.